Hi people, it's Ella here, and I have my tea, so you know what that means. It's another episode of Tea Time. This is going to be a spoiler-free review of The Legend Trilogy by Marie Lu. Just a disclaimer right now, if you're a bit confused, I only have 2 of the physical books. The other book, Champion, I have in ebook. I had very mixed feelings about this series. I didn't love it, but I didn't hate it. It was just kind of If you aren't familiar with this trilogy, I'll try to give you a quick spoiler-free overview, as the synopsis on the back of the books I think is too spoilery. The whole book takes place in a dystopian universe set in the future of America. The country is pretty much split up into 2 groups, the Republic, which rules the West, and the colonies, which I think is everything else. The trilogy is told in a dual point of view of June and Day. June and Day are 2 very opposite characters. June was born into wealth and power in the military, while Day was born poor and his nation's most wanted criminal. Without giving too much away, this trilogy focuses on the 2 crossing paths and how they have to deal with the government and which side of the war deserves to win. The first book of the trilogy is Legend, and I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. The second book is Prodigy, and I also gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. And finally, the last book of the trilogy is Champion, and I gave this book 3 out of 5 stars. I think the first book was probably my favorite in the whole trilogy. It really nicely set the characters in this world in a way that you got to know them naturally instead of throwing all this information at your face. I also never felt like I was missing any information like some other series do. It was all laid out very nicely and orderly, and you felt like you have been there. The second book was actually a bit of a blur for me, I'm not gonna lie. I felt like it was a lot of filler and it wasn't all that memorable. However, it was a spot where you did get to learn more about the characters, and it really set up for the final book in the trilogy. Champion is probably the book that I have the most opinions on. I'm gonna try and keep this as vague as possible to avoid spoilers, just in case you haven't read it though, so don't worry. I gave this book 3 stars instead of 4 because it really irked me. There were some things that these characters did that I really liked, and others I really hated. I will say though that I did get caught up with emotions and start to tear up at the end of one of these chapters. That whole chapter was so powerful, and while you were reading it, you just felt all the emotions. That's probably the best chapter in this whole series. However, the epilogue, well, I guess you could call it epilogue, of this book was so bad. I've never hated an epilogue as much as I hate the epilogue in this series. My perfect ending for this book would have been how the last chapter ended. But then she had to add an epilogue, and it ruined everything. This book would have had 4 out of 4 stars if it wasn't for that epilogue. I feel that strongly about the epilogue. Just a couple final thoughts on this whole trilogy. I'm not sure if it's because I binge watched the whole TV show, but this whole trilogy felt like Game of Thrones to me. If you're familiar with the TV show or the book of Game of Thrones, it's very complicated and there's a lot going on. But if you strip it back and think, okay, there's just 2 houses, and you keep some of the main characters and their personalities, you have the Legend Trilogy. Mainly throughout the whole 3rd book, I just kept comparing it to Game of Thrones. It's just like their personalities and the way the story's told and how it kind of turns out is very similar and Game of Thrones-esque. But maybe it's just me because I did just binge watch the whole of the TV show. But I mean, if you've seen Game of Thrones, read Game of Thrones, and also read this trilogy, do you understand where I'm coming from? Am I the only one that thinks this? I don't know. Yeah, overall, if you wanted to read this trilogy, I feel like the hype for this trilogy was really high like a couple years ago. Everyone was reading it, everyone was really loving it. And if I read this book then, I probably would have liked it more. But now the hype has died down and people don't talk about it anymore. I don't... If you want to read it by all means, but if you're just debating on whether you should pick it up or not, I would say pass. It is good in some aspects, but in others, it's very basic and boring, and there are better trilogies out there. But yeah, anyway, I hope you guys liked this review. If you did, please make sure to give it a like if you like, and subscribe, and that's it. So I'm gonna go. Bye!
Thanks for watching. Imagine Workshop is awesome. Would you like to subscribe? You've got mail. See you next time.